Hey there, everybody, and welcome to Out of the Pulpit. My name is Jonathan. So glad that you are here. As always, if you like what you see here, go ahead, hit that subscribe button, turn on that notification bell so that you can stay up to date with all things Out of the Pulpit. And don't forget about our new Instagram account. Just go to the IG and type in Out of the Pulpit, and I will pop right up. In this week's video, we're going to talk about school and where do pastors go to school. Now, I've already done a similar video way back when, like a year ago, when I was also grilling and really bad, worse than I am now at editing. So if you want to watch that, here's the link to that video. But I wanted to offer a more in-depth video on the different types of school that you can go to. And the reason that I'm doing this video is that it is time for me to go back to school. So I'm actually starting school again next week, and I'm super excited about it. I have transferred from Lexington Theological Seminary, fine institution, great institution, but I've transferred to United Theological Seminary of the Twin Cities. And it is at United where I will be pursuing an MA in Ethics and Justice. So really just getting right into the meat and potatoes of those videos, because I just mentioned that I'm getting an MA in Ethics and Justice, which is not generally or traditionally the path that most pastors go down. Most pastors are going to seek out what would be called a Master in Divinity. A Master in Divinity, of course, is graduate level work where you start to learn things about, not just pastoral leadership and spiritual care and things like that, but also church leadership, business models, power structures within the church. Not only do you get a deeper dive into ministry, how to minister to folks in the hospital, but you're also going to get, obviously, a really deep dive into theology. Different types of theology, Old Testament, New Testament, the epistles. You're going to get all of that education in a Master of Divinity, which is why most folks, when they become a pastor, or when churches are looking for a pastor, they're looking for a Master of Divinity. And you can get a Master of Divinity at really any seminary. And I was previously working on an MDiv, is what it's called shorthand. I was previously working on my MDiv at Lexington Theological Seminary. So if I want to be a pastor, why am I not pursuing the Master of Divinity? Well, there are quite a few reasons. It's really complicated, and I'm not going to get into everything. But most importantly, it's really a call thing for me. I feel called by God to pursue an MA of Ethics and Justice. It's right where my heart is. It's kind of the thrust of my own journey and my own, type or style of ministry. What is most important to me is justice and ethics in the church. And it also gives me some sort of wiggle room where maybe I don't have to work as a pastor 100% of the rest of my life, right? I can do justice work outside of the church. I can do justice work within the church. And most churches will be more than willing to accept a pastor that has an MA in Ethics and Justice. It's still a graduate degree, still a master's, right? And we're actually starting to see more and more of what we're calling alternative paths to ministry. And that sort of weaves us into what we're going to talk about next, because you have your seminary education where you can go for your Master's of Divinity or your MA in Ethics and Justice, or you can go get a doctorate. That sort of education comes from your standard seminary. But also, we can do what's called lay school. And lay school can take place at a lot of seminaries, have lay courses. And in fact, I sort of graduated from the lay course that Lexington Theological Seminary had. Now, they called it a certificate. It was a certificate in pastoral ministry. And actually, talking about these alternative path things, and I'm sorry if I'm bouncing all around, but I needed the certificate of pastoral ministry so that I could move on to the master's program. And the reason that I needed that to move on to the master's program is because I actually never graduated with a bachelor's. And that's for another video. That's not the point of this video. But it was sort of lay school. Most churches would accept that as lay school because it really was lay school, when in reality it was basically half of the master's level courses, and you're right in it. It's not sort of watered down or anything like that. But at LTS, where I was going to school before, that certificate would count towards lay school, or would be lay school for most churches. Now, lay school is for lay leaders. If you don't know what a lay leader is, it can mean a million different things to a million different people, to a million different churches. But basically, a lay leadership in churches are going to be like the level right below a pastor. Some churches will accept lay school for, associate ministers, or maybe you're a minister of spiritual care, or you're the church's sort of hospital chaplain that makes visits to folks that are in the hospital or housebound. Maybe they're some sort of elder or deacon, depending on the denomination. Those folks are what we call lay people. And so the lay folks, they'll go to school, lay school, where they'll get special training, they'll get the theological background, and this is how to be a lay leader, all that sort of stuff. That's in lay school, also sometimes known as certificate. So recap real quick, you got your seminary, you get your master's level, you can go to a seminary to get your lay school, or a lot of denominations have their own sort of form of lay school. The next thing I want to talk about is CPE. CPE stands for Clinical Pastoral Education. These are the folks that are really going to be the church's main source of chaplaincy in hospitals. Hospital work is very difficult. It's a field that not every pastor can go into. A lot of folks will say that not every pastor can be a chaplain, but every chaplain would make a fantastic pastor. It's a very different type of work. You're literally walking people through end-of-life issues, surgeries, life trauma and experiences, emergency situations. You're talking with families about how to write wills or how to decipher wills. It's a very specific calling that not everybody's meant to do. So we have that whole separate kind of school, that separate education called CPE, Clinical Pastoral Education, that helps folks get into that path. Now, a lot of churches will require a pastor to have CPE. A lot of denominations will require CPE to be ordained. But that's not always the case. But almost every time it is highly encouraged that if you're going towards the path of the ordination, that you do get CPE, just because you're going to have folks from your church in hospitals and end-of-life situations. So having that sort of training, that background, that education is really highly encouraged for pastors, not just chaplains. So you have your seminary master's education that most pastors are required to go through pretty much regardless of denominations, although not every denomination requires it and not every church requires it. You also have your lay school for lay leaders, and then you have CPE, Clinical Pastoral Education, for those who want to be chaplains, and this could be chaplain in a church or chaplain in the military somehow. They would take these courses as well. And then you do have some Bible colleges that will have different bachelor's or associate's degree in different specific fields of ministry. A lot of your worship leaders, the folks that are playing guitar or playing piano for a church or just leading worship, will get a bachelor's or an associate's in maybe worship leadership. Or maybe you're going to do religious work, but maybe not technically in a church, but outside the church in like the nonprofit sector. You might get a bachelor's or an associate's at a Bible college. Probably the only other nuance we need to talk about is just online versus traditional in-person classes. I'm doing the rest of my training. I only have a year left. 1 year left. I graduate in May, everybody. The rest of my education through United Twin Cities, which is, up in Minnesota, and I live in Cincinnati. The rest of my education is actually going to be completely online. The school I went to previously, Lexington Theological Seminary, did a hybrid where it was like 90% online, but you did have to take intensive courses. And honestly, United might require intensive courses if you're doing all of your education there, but just because I have so little left to do, I don't have to do any of that. So Lexington Theological Seminary, along with a lot of other seminaries, that's just the one I went to, have mostly online, but you go for an intensive course. Now, an intensive course is basically where you go in person, and traditional seminaries will have intensive courses, but it's what it sounds like. It's an intense course. It's knowledge, this much knowledge crammed into this much space to knock out some credits, and it blows your mind, and you're tired at the end of it. But it's incredibly fruitful. I love intensives, especially in a more online setting. Intensive was like when you got to see your friends. All of these friends that you built up in online discussion boards and talk to over Facebook or texting or whatever, you get to see them. And so intensives are really cool that way. But of course, you also still have your traditional in-person seminaries where you go to, and it's basically just like every other college or university. Live in dorms, or maybe you live in town, but you go to class in person just like everywhere else. So there it is. If you have any questions, go ahead and ask me in the comments. I'm hoping that if you are thinking about ministry, if you're thinking about filling a pulpit or becoming ordained so you can be a pastor or a priest, that this was helpful information for you, and I would again love to talk to you. If you have questions, go ahead and ask them down below. If none of this is interesting to you, I'm sorry, but I wanted to again make this video because I'm starting school next week. Super excited about it, super excited for my last year, and I thought, hey, this is a perfect opportunity to talk about education and pastors. And so there it is. And once again, if you want to support me, the best way that you can do that is to engage with my content by commenting, liking, sharing, subscribing, all that sort of stuff. And I appreciate it so much for all the loyal viewers that have been here from the beginning, and for you newer folks, thank you. I hope you have a great rest of your day, and God bless you.